Let's talk about robots. Speaking of potential external threats.
Yeah, right.
So Farzad, your brand is the robots are coming, right? You got a t-shirt line, all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about what makes you so excited about robots and what is going to change about our lives and what's going to be, okay, so we're in our 30s. I'm in my 40s. We had a life where we had a lot of manual labor. We did a lot of those things. What is your son's life going to be like that's very different when he's 30 than what your life was like when he was 30?
That is a question that I struggle with on the daily. So the robots are coming it was more like a thing that I was like, because I spent so much time thinking about AI automation, the whole thing with the advent of self-driving technology is like the beginning of like where we're going with artificial intelligence. It's like it's automating everything, not just physical but digital. The robots are coming was like a thing where in my head is like, I don't know if this is good or bad. It's just happening, right? The robots are coming. Like in my head, it was a very neutral statement. The robots are coming. Like, but it's like, it was more the artistic, artsy intent behind it was to invoke an emotion from whoever reads that to be like either be excited or very depressed by it or scared by it, right? Because it's so different depending on how someone is viewing that technology in the future. Like if I use artificial intelligence as an example right now, which is it's a form of automation, but it's like a digital robot is the way I think about it. You look at it, you're like, okay, it can literally probably do basically anything in the digital world in the next 10, 20 years. We've all seen ChatGPT 4. We've seen, some of the basic stuff that I can do, but it's basically a lawyer and a copywriter and a newscaster and all these things at once at a level that's like better than the average human across many different studies, right? It's not the best human at all those things, but it's better than the average human at almost anything that it can ingest, right? So then you extrapolate that further. You're like, okay, so what is that going to look like in 5 years once the hardware is ramped up, all the compute power is ramped up to be able to make that artificial intelligence better? And then you think about, okay, what happens when you take that and you put it within the context of a human or robot that can do tasks in the physical world, not just the digital world? So what does that mean for the labor market, right? ChatGPT-like softwares over the course of the next few years will replace a lot of the human labor we're doing, but then the question becomes, what will humans find to fill that space with, right? And so the way I think about the next 30 years is there's this hierarchy of human needs. So the bottom is physiological needs. It's just the most basic stuff. Then it's safety. So it's like making sure that you have a place where no one's going to kill you, right? Even things like financial safety, like employment, and making sure that you have safety from that perspective, right? And so as technology has kind of almost solved the physiological needs, especially in the Western nations, right? Like us five here, we don't really have to worry too much about like water, food, I mean, relatively speaking, we don't really have to worry about that.
Our infrastructure is robust enough that an earthquake doesn't shut the whole grid down for the whole country. Like
exactly. Now we're working on the safety one, right? Now as a people, some nations and worlds are behind others, but like now we're working on the safety one, and the safety one is the one where artificial intelligence, through its abilities and whatever you want to call it, can get us to a point where like I use myself as a perfect example for this, right? The safety stuff. Okay, I have a YouTube channel that generates enough income for me to never have to worry about anything. Okay, plus the foundation that I had. I couldn't do that 20 years ago. I just couldn't do it. The internet wasn't really like you couldn't sit down in front of a camera and have a show like this, right? Whereas now my studio probably spent a couple grand on it, and I have a DSLR camera, I got lights, I got a microphone, I have the internet, I have a computer, and all those things were technological improvements that happened on the last 20 years. Technology allowed me to get here. Now take all that and move it forward 30 years from now and apply to way more people, right? So in my head, I'm like, okay, so the physiological is met, the safety is being met, right? And then we're going to get into the love and belonging. Then we're going to get into the esteem and the self-actualization and stuff like that. So it's like when I think about the world in 30 years, it's probably going to be more geared to those top three things versus the safety and the physiological needs. I just don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, right? But what I do know is that love and empathy are going to be very important variables to have as a human being to be quote unquote successful in the world, just being a good person. And so I find a lot of peace in that, because it kind of takes away the worry of I'm concerned about what my child's going to do in a world where artificial intelligence and robots are going to be, versus like, if you think about what is the economy and what is the world, it's just humans making the world what we want it to be. Does a dog walker job exist 1,000 years ago? Does a YouTuber exist 1,000 years ago? Does a laundromat exist 1,000 years ago? Does a gas station exist 1,000 years ago? Right. So then you just move the time forward and you kind of think about that. So love and empathy and being a good person, I think, is just how I'm viewing setting up my kid for the best possible outcomes 30 years from now, regardless of what happens.
That's such a great point. I honestly think in 30 years, emotional intelligence will be the most important skill, more so than being a good mechanic or being good at coding or any of that kind of stuff. So that's such a great point, that if you can teach your son emotional intelligence, he will be more successful than a lot of people, because with all the distraction and all the confusion in our culture, it's very hard to have good emotional intelligence. So if you can teach your son that, he's going to be a happy kid. That's awesome. Justin, I know you had something to say.
No, hang on. Brandon, you got to say the joke. If we have to, I'll cut this, but you got to say it. You have to say it.
The one thing that did exist, but it was analog, was OnlyFans.
It's true. It's true.
The oldest profession.
The oldest profession, yeah.
OnlyFans is undefeated, bro. Undefeated.
He typed that in the private chat, and he was sitting over there making the face, trying to hold it in.
I'm like, what's this smirks?
You got to say that, dude. You got to let that one out.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's true.
Now, Justin.
Yeah, so we've been talking about emotions and, philosophical skills. Do you think in our lifetime our kids are going to see AI as philosophers or even personalities, kind of like Elvis or Michael Jackson was for us?
Oh, I mean, I struggle to think what AI will be even 10 years from now, because the rate of improvement of it is so insane. If you're in the year 2000 and you're thinking about the dot-com bubble that happened, right? And basically 95% of e-commerce companies just disappeared. You're thinking about, okay, the internet at that point, what is it going to be in 2024? It's going to be this brain for humanity that allows us to have a thing in our pocket where we can just do 3 movements with our fingers, and then we can get literally anything we want at our doorstep. It just shows up, right? Which means that now you have communities where you don't even have to leave your house. The things come to you. You don't go to the things. That's been like the human thing forever. We go to the thing. Now it's like the thing comes to us. That's what the internet has allowed. That was the internet. You know what I'm saying? So what will AI be 10, 20 years from now? I do think there will be like unique things that artificial intelligence will do from like an entertainment perspective, but to me, I think it's just going to be a tool that's going to allow us to, hopefully, this is the benign positive scenario, to allow us to become exactly who we want to be, whatever that means. I'm hoping what it does is it enables more people to be like, I think one of the very positive things about it is that it will have the ability to make everybody a small business owner in some way, because in a world where most physical and digital jobs that we think about today are quote unquote replaced or done by artificial intelligence, imagine the kind of bandwidth that opens up for people. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where people will start to figure out, oh, I find this valuable now. I find that valuable now. I find this valuable now.
Innovators will come out of the woodwork.
Exactly. And this is where I get very, very excited about this, is that it will also be done in places that typically wouldn't have access to be innovators. So like, what's one of the beautiful things about the internet and like, Starlink and these second and third world countries that are starting to get access to the internet, those people will have access to artificial intelligence as well. And those people have had lives and experiences that are so vastly different from ours that they will be able to build things using artificial intelligence that the entire world can benefit from. And our AI doesn't exist without the internet. So it's like, dude, I don't even know. Like, this is the scary part. I don't even know. But I feel like if humans are good, which I believe they are, I think it's going to be a very positive future. It just can't be reserved for the few. And that's where I get really, really scared.
I don't know.
The few will have the power.
COVID's kind of proved that humans are not good. If we're being completely honest. And the one thing I wanted to ask real quick before we kick it over to Dustin was, have you seen or read or heard of any of Dr. Michio Kaku's
some
information on quantum computing and like what's capable in just the next 10 years? Like, I know it's so incredibly scary if you just go and listen. I think he did an episode with Joe Rogan on his podcast that just, I didn't even know things existed that he was talking about. And if that, they talk about AI is the new internet. Well, like you said, without the internet, AI is useless, essentially.
Exactly.
But quantum computing is like essentially a whole nother level. And I'm curious, like, is that if they melded the two together, what's going to happen?
Exactly.
30 years. Who says 30 years isn't going to be like 100 years time with quantum computing?
Exactly. AI might be the thing that gets us to quantum computing because it's going to know how to do stuff better than we can. It just will. Will.
So one of the thought exercises that I had with AI, because I'm kind of a tech nerd myself, was, we're prompting GPT right now, right? And it's got a certain amount of knowledge database, but it's thinking about that data in a perfect way that human beings cannot. Mm-hmm. So eventually it's going to be strong enough and have, I guess, a high enough IQ that we could go through it and prompt, say, one specific subject, like drawing energy from a magnetic source for free. Like, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And then you can just prompt it saying, based off of all the history of man that we know in science, find what we missed.
Yeah.
And it's going to find it. Right? Like, I mean, it's crazy, the possibilities. And then you've got human augmentation being a possibility, robotic augmentation. You're seeing that with Neuralink. It's the very first step, and it's crazy to think about how much it's going to be significantly changed. Because if we think about how much the internet changed the world, and now we're thinking about how this is going to, do that in such a more exponential way, it's amazing and wonderful.
That's so fascinating you say that, because it's one of the things that's freaking me out with artificial intelligence goes along exactly what you just said. Is like, I'm trying to conceptualize what is AI's the maximum potential of artificial intelligence, right? And so I'm trying to think, okay, so the universe is, depending on what you believe, if you're religious or not, but let's just, however your worldview is, just conceptualize the maximum amount of intelligence. It's just the universe, like everything that exists. Okay. Everything that exists, that is the perfection that it exists in, that's maximum intelligence. It's like total understanding of everything. Okay. So that's maximum. To me, it feels like humans are at like 0.000000001. Okay. So 0.1 of the universe will feel like the most giant God we've ever perceived, but that God is still 0.1 of God, right? And that's where I get, like, that's where I stop being able to conceptualize artificial intelligence, because what is the limiting factor for artificial intelligence to get to the universe? It's just more chips, bro. Just more chips. Just make more chips. And when the artificial intelligence is smart enough to make chips better, it's just going to make more chips better at a faster rate than it was able to do it 10 years ago. And then it's going to be able to do it again and again and again and again. And that's where it gets really weird. It gets really weird. Like, I don't know how to conceptualize maximum AI.
Yeah. That's a really good analogy that had a moment there.
And you want to go further down that rabbit hole, those processors and chips are only thinking at a certain thought per minute. And if you do quantum computing, you're talking about billions of thoughts per minute.
Boom. What about the thing after quantum computing?
Yeah, it's crazy. So you were tying AI's kind of revolution to the hierarchy of needs. And when you talk about safety, that's where my hey, I can see this going very badly type of thing
Sure.
comes into play, because, and just hear me out, it's going to start with like, well, hey, this is objectively, statistically, doing this is going to save this many lives this year in this country because, cars won't crash into each other or whatever, right? That's an example. Where's that going to stop? Because, my head jumps to like Minority Report, where
100%.
it's like we're predetermining whether or not someone's guilty or not because of like an algorithm that decided that, oh, well, this guy, because of these factors, is going to commit a crime when he's 47 years old or something. And I'm like, how do we rein that in? Where do we stop that? And like, we've seen this play out, and this is why I'm concerned a little bit, is with our laws here in America, right? The way that they get passed is so far behind technology. Like, we can't go arrest sex traffickers in the United States because of the difference between like this state and that state and whose jurisdiction is it and stuff like that. So, that creates a very interesting set of problems, and I can see that spiraling out of control. You're a lot more, versed on this. Have you thought about that? What are some counters to that? Maybe I'm just seeing this very one-dimensional.
No, I think you're 1,000% correct. And this is where it's, sounds like y'all are, I'm gonna use a Bitcoin analogy, believe it or not. This is very tech bro. So how familiar are you guys with Bitcoin?
Very familiar.
Very familiar.
Kind of? Okay.
Dustin's the maxi.
Not me.
Sweet.
I like
the
you
idiot.
too.
Okay.
That's all, yeah.
Okay. So if you look at Bitcoin from its existence to now, it's the only cryptocurrency that has survived all the crap, right? All the oh, it's fake, or to the point now that the SEC has approved an ETF to actually trade Bitcoin in the United States, which that to me is a sign that says, okay, this is a legitimate thing that exists. Okay, but why does Bitcoin work? It's because it's a thing that was donated to humanity that exists like oxygen or water, right? That's the key thing there. It's not controlled by a single entity. It just exists like water and oxygen and the earth. It just exists, right? Kind of like the internet. The internet kind of exists, but you have to pay a fee to get access to the internet. That's what an ISP is. But the internet is like a collection of humanity's network to tie to each other. Like that's just exists by the function of us having computers and being connected to each other through pipes on the ground or through satellites in the sky. So I think the only way artificial intelligence has a bright future is if it's done in the same way that it just exists. It just exists for humanity to have equal access to it. Because then if you do that, humanity's will dictate what artificial intelligence is, right? Whereas the opposite is, and this is where I get really scared right now, you have three entities, basically, 4-ish, but you have Microsoft, OpenAI, or closed AI, whatever you want to call it. So you have that. Yeah, you got Mr. Sam Altman, that's one god. Sam Altman is one god. Then you have Google with Gemini, that's another god. And then you have Elon Musk and XAI. Yeah, burn it with fire. And then you have Elon Musk and with XAI and Tesla, that's your other god. So you have three gods right now, right? And these three gods are trying to soak up all the resources available to them to make their god be God, right? But the outcome is that at some point, one god will win, because once artificial intelligence reaches like escape velocity, that artificial intelligence is going to be the winner, because it will get to a point where it's just better than everybody else's, so it becomes the winner. If that technology doesn't get donated to humanity, at some point, that technology is going to fall in the hands of the wrong person. And when the wrong person has infinite power, so that's how I view it. I think it needs to exist. It just needs to exist.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Farzad. And when Elon today decided to open source Grok,
step in the right direction.
Great idea. Yeah. So if you guys, XAI, the large language model, the only one that has access to all the Twitter data set is Grok. And it's way behind. It's probably a year behind ChatGPT, even Gemini, but it's catching up quickly. It's funny It's not trying to censor things. If you ask it to generate George Washington historically accurately, it will. So it has a lot of advantages along those lines. But that was a game changer for me today. Grok going open source is going to not only make it advance a lot more quickly because everyone can start working on it, but it gives it to humanity. It is a gift of humanity as opposed to closed AI, which started out open source and then suddenly decided, oh, look at all this money we can make. We're going to close it down. We're not a nonprofit anymore. So yeah.
And Elon has the right idea, is open sourcing things to allow the freedom, like you were saying. And to touch on what him and Jordan Peterson have been screaming from the rooftops is our governments and our people are reactive and not proactive.
Yes.
With countering things that could be dangerous or problematic. And Jordan Peterson was just on the Capitol in the House speaking in front of a committee about the fact that there are currently AIs that can tell with a 95 plus percentile of just the basic information they have social media wise, what you're going to buy, who you're going to vote for, all these different things. And so, you multiply that by 10 or 100 or 1,000 times when these AIs are continuously upgrading at such an exponential rate, you're getting the point where, like you were saying, the Minority Report, it's like it can predict what you're going to buy, what you want to buy, what you're instinctually perceptive and vulnerable to, whether it's pornography, whether it's all these things. And so like advertising is going to become more sinister. And there's a lot of ways that this can get really squirrely and really bad if we don't stop it. And so people like Elon are the folks that we really need to support and we really need to help. And with it being open source now, I feel like a lot of people are going to jump in, like 0 Day and a couple other guys, and just hopefully try to make some stands with it. Right. I mean, that's what I'm praying for.
No, I agree. I give credit to Meta too, because their stuff is open source as well with Llama and stuff like that. So like they've done that stuff, and I'm very happy that they did that. So, but I think the core principle there is that we have to make sure that humanity has equal access to whatever the capabilities of the AI is, whatever that means in 10 to 20 years time. Like open source is a fantastic step forward, but the step I'm really hoping happens is like, oh, only we have access to this tool thing that can help us do this thing. That's where I get a little scared, because that's when, okay, but what's the thing? What's the thing that's so powerful that you need access to, right? But I don't know how to conceptualize that yet, because thank God we're not there yet, but it's coming very, very, very quick.